Today was the day we were meant to leave the European Union, but tonight our fate seems no clearer. The Prime Minister threw everything at today's vote, a special Friday sitting, offering to resign if her party backed it, and cutting the deal in two so that her precious red lines vaporised. But despite every desperate turn, it all failed. Although the margin of defeat, 58 votes, was significantly down from her last attempt, we are left in Brexit paralysis. Can MPs find a way forward next week? Outside Parliament, anger is rising, with competing rallies and protests from groups saying that Brexit has been betrayed by politicians. But who is the man behind fishing for leave protests today? We track him down to ask if he is Njura AB, whose Facebook profile links to far-right extremists.
Do you call yourself Njura AB?
So I've got to deal with this chap and I've got to go. Thanks very much, guys.
So Britain's Brexit future could be leaving the European Union in just 2 weeks without a deal, or staying in for at least another year whilst politicians try to find a compromise deal. A large crowd of pro-Brexit demonstrators gathered outside Parliament, as at tonight's too. A combination of opposition MPs, the DUP and 28 hardline Brexiteers from her own party defeated Theresa May's deal for a third time. She told MPs she feared the Commons was reaching the limit of what it could achieve. A hint, perhaps, that a general election could be necessary if the Commons can't reach a compromise in the coming days. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, is with me now. General election?
Theresa May gave one phrase that might have made you think that, but let's just stand back. We have been looking for a while. Newspapers keep showing us these sort of decision trees, all the places that the various outcomes could take us. What's happening at the moment is that some big branches are snapping off. Today was meant to be the day that the withdrawal agreement had to be passed if we were to get the short extension to the Brexit date down to May. Under what the EU said, that is now not available, and we are potentially, there could be flexibility in this as yet, but it has not been stated by anyone. We are in the realm of a long extension, potentially. What will Theresa May do in this situation? Well, she did allude to the idea that maybe this House, this Parliament, isn't up to the job. Didn't spell it out, but it was quite clear that what she was talking about there was that there might need to be a parliament, an election to come up with another parliament. Knowing Theresa May, as we've come to over the last few years, she is the sort of person whose instincts will be, even though she lost by a bigger margin than she expected today, her instincts will be to try again. And then we have the MPs' indicative votes process, which comes back on Monday, them trying to look for the sort of solution, and all the signs are that what the sort of solution they would come up with, if they could agree on anything, is the sort of thing that is toxic for her to touch. But she underlined again today that she doesn't want to see us have a disorderly Brexit, which makes you think that she might just think that she could somehow fuse whatever they have come up with to her withdrawal agreement and push it. What we do know is that Europe is tapping its watch impatiently, and Donald Tusk, the European Council President, has said that he wants a plan from Britain in a week on Monday. A clear plan, a detailed plan. And when you go through what I was just explaining, things are looking like in the coming week, it is very hard to see that coming together. This is how a date that was meant to be Brexit, date with Brexit destiny, actually turned out to be nothing of the sort. They gathered in front of Parliament on the day they'd hoped to celebrate Brexit, waiting instead for MPs to vote for a third time on Theresa May's Brexit deal. Mid-afternoon, they heard the result.
Ayes to the right, 286. The noes to the left, 344.
You're kidding. What a shower.
Theresa May had hoped to squeeze down her opponents more than this, so there was no clear plan in response, but a clear rebuke to MPs and a threat that this House, this Parliament, may be reaching the end of its useful life.
The implications of the House's decision are grave. The legal default now is that the United Kingdom is due to leave the European Union on the 12th of April, in just 14 days' time. That is not enough time to agree, legislate for and ratify a deal, and yet the House has been clear it will not permit leaving without a deal. Mr. Speaker, I fear we are reaching the limits of this process in this House. This House has rejected no deal. It has rejected no Brexit. On Wednesday, it rejected all the variations of the deal on the table. And today, it has rejected approving the withdrawal agreement alone and continuing a process on the future. This government will continue to press the case for the orderly Brexit that the result of the referendum demands.
The House has been clear. This deal now has to change. There has to be an alternative found. And if the Prime Minister can't accept that, then she must go, not at an indeterminate date in the future, but now, so that we can decide the future of this country through a general election.
The noes to obey the instructions of 17.4 million people, 344.
One Brexit rebel MP who opposed the Brexit deal read out the defeat to cheers from Leavers. The story of a tense day in Parliament is how the Tory rebel Brexiteers, who insist Mrs May's deal locks us into EU institutions, flaked, but not enough to get her victory. One by one, big names stood up to announce after months of opposition they felt they now had to back the deal under relentless pressure. Mid-debate, there were even attempts still to hold them back.
May I urge my right honourable friend to think again before deciding to change his mind and support what is, in all intents and purposes, a meaningful vote 3. We don't know what the future holds for sure, but what we do know for sure is that we can only decide on those facts that are before us, and we know this is a bad deal.
The problem I have is that I cannot countenance an even longer extension, and I cannot countenance holding European elections in May.
It's been a roller coaster. We've been put in exactly the compression, the bind that the government announced they would put us in. Ollie Robbins in that bar talking about giving us a choice between a long extension or this deal and trying to back us into a corner. That's exactly what they did, and colleagues have been absolutely wrestling with it. They've been making themselves sick with anxiety. I nearly voted for it. Last night I was writing an article to say we're beaten. On the numbers in Parliament, we're beaten, we must give in. But I just realised I am not going to surrender.
Well, I was a bit surprised because they'd all made very passionate speeches in the past, as I have done, about what is wrong with it.
Not the distant past either, like yesterday, some of them.
But they need to explain that for themselves. I'm not here to make their lives more difficult, but I think there will be a lot of disappointment from their supporters that they change their mind.
Shame on you! Shame on you!
While the demonstrators called out, "Where's our Brexit?" MPs threw blame in every direction.
Mr. Speaker, no. Mr. Speaker, we cannot allow the future of this country to be held to ransom by the never-ending internal Tory psychodrama.
It seems to me that the losers don't know how to lose and the winners don't know how to win.
I'm speaking, Mr. Speaker, because I am exasperated and I am fed up with the bickering that has gone on in this House. It cannot be beyond the wit of the men and women of this great place to come to a decision.
In the middle of it all, a new political party was formed, the Independents, getting themselves ready for a possible European election campaign.
Will has now today formed itself into a new political party that will change the face and direction of British politics.
The Prime Minister repeated to all MPs the pledge she'd made to Tory MPs in private, to quit her job when Brexit was delivered.
I have said that I am prepared to leave this job earlier than I intended to secure the right outcome for our country.
Some of those who backed the agreement in return for that pledge hope a new leader will, if necessary, rip it up.
We are a sovereign nation. My view about this politics trumps any kind of agreement. There's no sovereign agreement ever made that the nation that makes it doesn't have the right to withdraw from.
So that's the dream, really. That's what Theresa May unlocked. That's actually pulled you on side, is by saying, I'm going, and you hope someone who comes in after her will be willing to walk away from that agreement.
Well, ultimately, I think as a sovereign nation, that is our right.
Theresa May hopes Labour MPs with Leave supporting seats would come over in big numbers to help her today. She actually only got 5 of them. So you were inching maybe towards her, sniffing around the idea of voting for this agreement. until she said, right, I'm going, and that absolutely crystallised your fears that you don't know what you're voting for.
For many MPs, that was the final straw on our side. It may have been designed to reassure Conservative MPs. It's had precisely the opposite effect on Labour MPs, and there are MPs now who would have voted for her deal who now will not under any circumstances.
All Theresa May's instincts will be to try again with her deal, but the numbers will be very hard to shift. Parliament's last-minute dashed attempt to come up with other solutions resumes on Monday, while the EU sits in anguish, tapping its watch.
Well, the European Union has called an emergency leaders' summit for April the 10th to assess the latest twist in Britain's Brexit saga, warning that a chaotic exit from the EU is now a very likely scenario, with all 27 member states now fully prepared. Our Europe editor, Matt Fry, is with me now. Matt, what's going on in Europe?
They didn't even give a press conference today to give their reaction. It was just a very short and rather pert and pithy statement that they now think a no-deal scenario is the most likely and that their preparations for that have been completed. A slightly more robust statement came from the head of the German Chambers of Industry, who said the chaos is now absolute. So there is a real fear still that the no-deal scenario might happen. They are prepared for all the consequences of that, including 39 billion euros not coming their direction, repercussions for trade and all the rest of it. At the same time, they are preparing for this emergency summit on the 10th of April, and they are expecting whoever will be in charge and go there, whether it's Theresa May or someone else, to ask for a lengthy extension. They will only grant that under certain conditions. Number one, Britain has to take part in the European parliamentary elections. And number two, possibly, there has to be either a general election or a referendum, which is an extraordinary scenario that Brussels is basically saying, yes, you can have that extension, but we're going to call the shots on this. So just remember that when you think of the phrase taking back control. And here's the thing that really kind of worries them and eats at them. If they grant this extension, is the gamble going to pay off? Are we going to come back in a year's time to this platform in front of the House of Commons and have exactly the same scenario run again, but in the meantime, with Brexit and everything around it, poisoning the wells of the European Union? That's what they're really worried about.
Matt Fry. Over now to Krishnan inside Parliament. Krish.
Well, good evening from a now very quiet central lobby where I spent the afternoon getting reaction from MPs on all sides. Shortly after the vote, I spoke to Heidi Allen, the new interim leader of the independent group of MPs who've just renamed themselves Change UK. They want to be a political party called that. And Nadhim Zahawi, who's the Children's Minister. The deal is dead.
Of course I accept it. I think we have to now look to Parliament to see where the Parliament can coalesce around a particular outcome that we can all get around to have an orderly Brexit.
But Theresa May seemed to be saying that she'd put the deal again. You know, at the end of her statement there, she said, we'll continue to try and seek our deal. So this deal's going to come back, is it?
Well, every option that Parliament rejected when it was put to it requires a withdrawal agreement. That was what the Prime Minister was saying. So whatever we settle on in the end, and we need to settle
this. The withdrawal agreement might come back, but not the political declaration.
Well, let's see where Parliament comes out, because clearly at the moment Parliament is not coming together. It's not deciding on a way forward. There are those who want to rerun the referendum, and that's what they'd like to do. I disagree with it. I think it just compounds the uncertainty. Businesses in Stratford-on-Avon do not want another referendum and more uncertainty. We don't know where that ends up. What we do know is it'll be divisive and poisonous, dare I say. Others want a customs union.
But you accept that Brexit with a customs union is Brexit?
I don't think it's a good option, because actually it doesn't allow us to negotiate trade deals, to do the things that we promised the British people. In our manifesto, I stood on a manifesto that said we would come out of customs union. I would argue against it. Let's see where Parliament settles. I want to see a settlement to this.
And I suppose that's where, and again, the people's vote, to me, all roads and possibilities lead to that, because Nadhim is right, the customs union, for a lot of people who want a hard Brexit, isn't what they were expecting. So if that does end up being the deal that is found as a compromise here, check with the British people if they want it, yes or no. That is the solution to everything, it really is.
By the time we have another referendum, less time will have passed between the 2015 election and the 2017 election. We constantly go back to people and say, who do you want to run the country, what do you want to happen now, and people say different things.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with doing them again?
Well, first of all, a referendum is when we actually subcontract being representatives here to the people because it was difficult. But when they tell us what they want us to do, we ought to deliver it for them, because democracy, that you believe in quite rightly, as does Heidi, requires the consent of the loser. If the loser says, I'm not consenting, I don't want this, what do you do then? What do you say to the people who were victors? Oh, what, we'll try a third time?
I disagree. I think it would be, I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't dismiss those concerns. I really understand that. But the point is, it could also, dare I say, be a massive exercise of healing for the country. There are so many people who voted leave last time that now regret it, knowing what the deal's looking like. Young people who weren't able to vote. I think it could be the greatest act of democracy to check.
But did you say that you wanted another referendum on the doorstep in 2017, that you wanted to overturn the referendum?
I said, even if it was called something else, I wanted us to be in the equivalent of the single market in the customs union, and that would be the only kind of deal I would accept. And if it was going to be damaging to the economy, I wouldn't support it. That's what I said in 17.
Did you say that you wanted a second referendum?
No, because at that stage we still had time, and I thought the Prime Minister might get us a deal.
Do you see the democratic problem with that?
I do, 100%.
But you said one thing to get elected, and now you're doing something completely different.
Yeah, not to get elected, but I suppose the other harsh reality of being an MP, you're elected to make decisions and to take executive decisions based on the facts and the analysis. We can't always make policy based on what people were saying or asking for 2 or 3 years ago. We have to deal with the here and now. And if my constituents don't like it, they are perfectly entitled to boot me out of the dispatch box. But it's that we are, as MPs, we have the trust put in us to deal with the reality of what's on offer. And the reality of what's on offer now in this deal is not what people were expecting when they voted to leave.
Nadhim Zahawi, isn't the real problem now that because Theresa May has said she's going, Brexit all depends on who wins the Conservative Party election, leadership election. So today is about the Conservative Party again, rather than the country.
Well, let's be clear. The Prime Minister said if her deal goes through, then she will go earlier. Her deal didn't go through today, so I absolutely think she should stay and she should see the process through.
We are going to be fighting the European elections now, aren't we?
Well,
that's the reality of the situation.
No, not necessarily, because if Parliament next week comes together and we can settle this and have a view as to what we want the way forward, right? Yes. But then we can get out. I would not. I would not vote for us standing in European elections. I cannot do that. I will never do that.
But you don't. Whether you vote for it or not doesn't matter. We're just talking about the reality. The reality is, if the deal doesn't go through, we're looking at a long extension and taking part in the elections, aren't we?
Well, let's get to that.
Isn't that the truth?
Let's get to that decision when we need to make that decision. It is the beginning, I think, of that political chaos and meltdown that we talked about earlier, which will open the doors for populists, hard left or hard right, to come through and say, these mainstream politicians have failed and have not listened to you. Now you want a different kind of politics, and that's a very bad place for us to be.
Nadhim Zahawi and Heidi Allen. Well, I've also been speaking to the Conservative MP and leading Brexiteer, Bernard Jenkin, and I asked him if Theresa May should now resign.
She's obviously going to step down shortly, and I would expect that to happen.
Should she step down before the European summit on April the 10th?
Well, she would carry on as a caretaker Prime Minister while the Conservative Party elects a new leader anyway. So I don't think you should rush your fences on that one.
But what I'm saying is, should she be the person taking the decisions at the European summit on April the 10th? Well, which is to decide whether we go into a long delay and fight the European elections and all of that.
Well, that would be for a matter.
Or should somebody else?
That would be a matter for her, but I would expect her to be the Prime Minister that takes the decisions.
It's a matter for you, isn't it? It's a matter for all of you in the Conservative Party.
I am anticipating
to go to her and say, this is what we want.
Well, that is an option, but I would expect her to go to the summit and ask for a long extension.
So what do you say to the 17.4 million and your Brexiteer colleagues who fear that Brexit is lost now?
Well, I think a lot of them are very downhearted. They've been whipped into a frenzy.
But are they wrong to think Brexit is lost?
I think they're wrong to think that, absolutely wrong to think that. I think the spirit of that referendum result will never go back into the bottle. And if they try and have another referendum without leave on the ballot paper, that would be a catastrophe for democracy.
If you think this is a long struggle, why can't you on Monday say agree to a customs union and then say, well, we'll just keep on fighting for everything else. Well, let's Brexit, let's have a customs union, and then we'll keep fighting for more Brexit.
If we have a customs union, it's going to have a backstop, it's going to have the implementation period, it's still going to have all the horrors in the withdrawal agreement.
How can you Brexit without a withdrawal agreement when Parliament won't allow you to have a no deal?
Well,
You're sort of locked in a circle of hell, aren't you?
Maybe with this Parliament we are. But
so you want an election?
I don't want an election.
Well, that's the only way to change the Parliament.
But I can tell you that the possibility of an early general election is no more or less likely than it would have been if we'd signed the withdrawal agreement. What we will make sure, though, is the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom will have more freedom and more negotiating leverage than if we had signed the withdrawal agreement, and that's in the national interest.
I mean, the European Commission have just said that no deal is still a likely scenario on April the 12th. Well, that's music to your ears, isn't it?
That is my preferred option.
So we could be in that absurd situation of Europe saying, go on, go, walk out the door, and Britain going, no, we don't want to go.
Well, bear in mind,
we are that cat, aren't we, that makes a big noise and then doesn't want to leave the room.
Well, except that this Parliament voted through the European Withdrawal Act, which agreed that we would leave, and it set the legislation that we can leave with or without a withdrawal agreement.
Should the Prime Minister do whatever Parliament has a majority for next week?
I will not vote for the withdrawal agreement. If other MPs force through the withdrawal agreement, it's not going to be with my support.
I'm just saying as a matter of democracy, because it's not voting through the withdrawal agreement on Monday, is it? It's just expressing a preference. If Parliament can manage to come to a majority decision on a form of Brexit, should the government do it?
Well, I think it would be a great mistake for the Prime Minister to say, force through her withdrawal agreement with even more restrictions attached to the withdrawal agreement through the political declaration than are already there. I think it's a bad political declaration. A customs union would make it worse. I'm not going to vote for the withdrawal agreement under any circumstances.
Bernard Jenkin. Well, thousands of protesters calling for Britain to leave the EU without delay have been staging noisy demonstrations outside Parliament all day, bringing traffic to a standstill as they blocked the roads. Some broke into cheers as Theresa May's deal was voted down for a third time. But later, Nigel Farage told them that what should have been a day of great celebration had become one of great betrayal. Kathy has been among the protesters.
Thanks, Krish. Well, the UKIP rally has been taking place just up the road behind me. It's just been wrapping up now. The far-right activist Tommy Robinson addressed it for the second time just now. Brexit supporters had intended to come here to cheer the UK leaving the European Union. In the end, they were forced to cheer Theresa May's deal being defeated. They see that as a chance to campaign for what they consider a proper Brexit. A lot of exuberance, you can hear a bit of exuberance behind me now. But a lot of people saw this as a day out in the sunshine, have a bit of fun. There was quite a bit of anger too, a bit of a dark underside to what was going on. Hostility at MPs, also the media. But a bitter determination, I think, above all of that, to absolutely press for Brexit to happen, and whether that's via a second referendum or a general election. Nigel Farage addressed crowds here, the former UKIP leader, and he called for a revolution, and he wanted that revolution to begin now. Some called themselves latter-day Jarrow marchers, trudging 270 miles from Sunderland to Fulham. But thousands more had just come for the day, a day which they'd hoped would bring independence from the European Union. So where have you come from today?
Oxford.
And why have you come on the march?
Because we should have been celebrating today, we should have been leaving today, and I am absolutely appalled by what's going on. Never marched in my life, but I feel so angry that I'm definitely marching today.
What do you think about what's going on in Westminster today?
What, the event or the
Well,
MPs?
MPs voting for the third time.
What's the point? They couldn't organise a drink in a brewery, could they? Let's be honest.
Are you not tempted to push MPs to get the deal they can on Brexit rather than waiting and perhaps you won't get Brexit at all?
No, we'll get Brexit, don't worry.
And what's at stake if
We've
they
waited
vote?
so long, we'll get it. If we don't get it, our kids will get it. We'll get it.
But at the moment it seems that we have a parliament full of Remainers, and we have a parliament that is full of Remainers, and we have a country that voted to leave.
So you're pretty angry about that?
I'm furious.
Where have you come from today? You look very smartly dressed. These women have become a bit of a fixture on the Brexit pilgrimage, but some of the rowdier protesters preferred I interviewed them instead.
Why don't you give me an opportunity to say the way you conduct yourself is...
And we have marched from Sunderland. We were there on the day that the march began.
We support Brexit and we will support anyone who's willing to stand up and deliver the will of the people.
Arriving in Parliament Square, a pipe band provided an unusually sectarian soundtrack, punctuated by the now familiar cries of traitors lobbed at MPs and the media. And as news filtered through that Theresa May's deal had been defeated, some rejoicing.
Theresa May's deal has been defeated by 58.
Yes! Eccentrics, pensioners, old, some young, many were here for a good-natured protest. Others, though, wandered a few hundred yards up the road to hear the far-right activist Tommy Robinson seize the opportunity of a UKIP platform to deliver an Islamophobic rant. It was the ex-English defence leader's appointment as an advisor to UKIP which prompted former leader Nigel Farage to quit the party. Are you concerned that Tommy Robinson's just up the road?
He's not my cup of tea.
Mr Farage had joined the march today less than a mile from Parliament Square, but the crowd didn't seem to hold that against him.
If they force us to fight a second referendum, we'll beat them by a bigger margin than that time.
In the shadow of a parliament where MPs appear resolutely unable to deliver Brexit, the people who voted for it are equally resolute that it must happen, come what may.